Hello and welcome to another journey through the history of groundbreaking weapons. Today we are talking about a type of rifle that has become an integral part of the modern world. We're talking about nothing less than the dominant infantry weapon of the modern era. A weapon that has been used in every war for the past 80 years. And has been rightly called the scourge of humanity, the assault rifle. But who invented it, and what was so new about it? Well, the story is well known, and there are many videos about it, some of them really good, by the way. I can't tell you anything new today, but my approach is new. I want to tell the story from the perspective of the inventors involved, emotionally and accessibly, even if it involves some kind of speculation and embellishment. Let's start at the beginning. Sorry, was that too corny? I'm taking you on another journey through space and time. We're going back to a German city, more precisely to Suhl, in the winter of 1942. It's a hive of activity. Suhl is the beating heart of German war weapon production. This is where they are made, the rifles and pistols that German soldiers carry in the field. In Poland, in France, in Africa. The best industrial foremen and gunsmiths work 7 days a week and 12 hours a day for victory, which, as we know today, was not to come. We look into the anteroom of the Handel Company's executive office and see a slim, nervous, older gentleman looking at his Glashütte wristwatch. He is in his late 50s and exudes competence through and through. The man in the slightly worn brown 1940s style suit is none other than HUGO SCHMEISSER, the inventor of the submachine gun. But that was 25 years ago, in 1918. Now, in 1942, he is head of development at Handel and has made a name for himself. Schmeisser senses that this day will herald something special, because the secretary was very clear. Mr. Schmeisser, the board members would like to speak with you. Mail from the army office. We are stopping all ongoing developments, because there are new instructions. Everything else will be discussed at the meeting. Schmeisser is curious, but also nervous, understandably. What will they ask for him this time? He looks at his watch again. 30 minutes later. The time has come. HUGO SCHMEISSER is sitting at the table with the board members. And now he will find out what the hour has struck. Well, Herr Schmeisser, today is a very special day. You are needed for the development of a new rifle that will be decisive in the war. German soldiers will go into battle with superior weapons in the future. A new submachine gun that fires the brand new 792 by 33 cartridge instead of the weak 9mm Luger. This one is lethal at 400 meters and light enough for every soldier to carry 200 rounds in interchangeable 30-round magazines. And this weapon is to be developed here in Suhl with us. The Handel Company is making history. Schmeisser could hardly believe what was being asked of him. The 792 by 33 was not as powerful as the 8x57 IS of the Wehrmacht carbine 98K, but roughly 3 times more powerful than the already far from weak 9mm Luger. Wait a minute, you want to fire this cartridge fully automatically? How much mass would the bolt have to have? Should I just build in a brick? And maybe use a shock absorber from a Tiger tank as the main spring? Listen, this is absurd. You can't build a submachine gun for such a high performance cartridge. At least not if you want to be able to lift it. Was that really how it happened? We don't know, but it could have. Engineers often react stubbornly when presented with challenges, and perhaps HUGO SCHMEISSER was no exception in this case. The fact is that until then, there had been hardly any reliable, relatively manageable, fully automatic weapons in powerful calibers. The Wehrmacht and the Waffen-SS, both parts of the German armed forces, had the MP40, 9mm Luger caliber, and only fully automatic, no switching back to semi. The British used the Stain, also in the 9mm Luger caliber. The Americans had the Thompson M1 in the 45 auto caliber, also a pistol round. All attempts to produce fully automatic weapons in powerful calibers had basically failed. The FG-42, a paratrooper weapon, was very difficult to control in the powerful carbine caliber and was basically more of a light machine gun. 9mm Luger too weak, 8x57 too powerful, so it was decided that a new weapon was needed. A compact rifle that could be fired fully automatically, even in continuous fire, and still had enough power for longer distances. An interim solution, stronger than a submachine gun, and weaker than a carbine. A machine carbine. And that was to be the working name of the new weapon. Maschinenkarabiner 42, or abbreviated MKB-42. A completely new concept. Something that had never been seen before. But the technical challenges were enormous. Without question, Schmeisser's brain was already working on solutions, even while he complained about the difficulty of the task. Very typical for engineers. But he wasn't going to get off that easily, because the board members had even more bad news for him. Things are going to get exciting, because we are getting competition. The Army Weapons Office, the Heereswaffenamt, wants to make it a competition. The Walther company has been given the same contract. We have to be faster, better, and cheaper. Otherwise, the contract will go to Zellamedes. Did I mention that we urgently need this contract? Great, Schmeisser must have thought. As if I wasn't already under enough pressure. I'm running out of materials, my best people are at the front, and now Walther is breathing down my neck. But what can he do? HUGO SCHMEISSER gets to work. A few months later, the new weapon was ready and working. It looked pretty sharp, didn't it? That's a hot gun. Well, the technical-looking housing, the long curved banana magazine, the pistol grip, radically different and yet functional. We are witnessing the birth of a whole new type of weapon. so effective, so dangerous, and so powerful that it still steers emotions in a unique way today. The assault rifle was born, the Sturmgewehr, even if the name came later. But we'll come back to that in a while. Walther in Cellamelis had not been idle either. The MKB-42W looked quite similar to the Handel model, but functioned quite differently. Two independently developed weapons that could certainly be described as equivalent. It's easy to imagine how HUGO SCHMEISSER must have felt when he was allowed to inspect the competitor's weapon for the first time. At some point, that definitely had to happen. On the one hand, he will have noticed that the Walther weapon was extremely well made. Walther took these things serious. Everything was machined from solid metal. It had an ingenious rotating head bolt that looked proper, rather than just delaying like the mass-delayed bolt that Schmeisser had integrated. Technically, the weapon was a treat, which Schmeisser is sure to have noticed. He was definitely able to. But he will have seen one thing immediately. The weapon was far too expensive and too complex for wartime production. He himself had taken a completely different approach. Stamped parts, simple and cheap to manufacture. Well, keep in mind, there were almost no fully trained lathe operators and milling machine operators left, as those were needed on the front lines of the escalating war. The reality was that there were only semi-skilled assistants, often women, maybe even captured people. They could hardly operate a lathe, but a punch and a press were more realistic. Just press a button when it comes down. Schmeisser must have realized, we're going to win this. Walther has messed it up. They probably think we're still at peace and that this is a hunting weapon for the rich. It's unaffordable, this thing. But I have to admit it's brilliantly made. Thoughts like these must have gone through his mind. And that's how it turned out. Handel was awarded the contract. Success. But not without restrictions. The Army Weapons Office, the Heereswaffenamt, wanted a different locking system, not the mass bolt system from Schmeisser's prototype. It was considered too sensitive against ammunition and too susceptible to contamination. But they also did not want Walther's complicated, expensive rotating head system. We want a perfectly normal, rigid, tilting block system, like in the FG-42. Robust, easy to manufacture, and tried and tested countless times. Schmeisser certainly didn't like that. His beautiful, carefully balanced bolt system rejected. Now he was supposed to steal this boring Browning system and install it in the weapon. But Schmeisser wasn't the type to hold a grudge. He was a practical man and got to work. This is how the weapon that would later go into serious production as the Sturmgewehr 44, the assault rifle 44, came into being. But first, there was another hurdle to overcome. Perhaps the most difficult one of all. And it was not a technical hurdle. Hitler's approval had to be obtained. Because things were heating up at the Army Weapons Office. Hitler had made his position very clear. No new rifle, no new cartridge. From Hitler's point of view, the team consisting of the Carbine 98 as the standard weapon and the Maschinengewehr 42 nicknamed the bone saw, was perfectly adequate. He wanted to win the war with these two weapons. In his view, new weapon development were something for the post-war period, after the victory, of course. He had made that clear. Period. From the perspective of the decision makers in the army, this was the wrong strategy. Without a superior new weapon, there was little hope. Keep in mind, the loss of the 6th Army, which had been wiped out in the Stalingrad pocket, made it abundantly clear to the Army Weapons Office. In urban combat, neither the carbine nor the machine gun was the right choice. Only a compact automatic rifle chambered for an intermediate power cartridge could solve this problem. What to do? Continue? Ignore the Führer's order? And possibly be put up against the wall for it? Or stop everything, even though the prototypes worked sensationally well? A difficult decision. After all, these were all distinguished officers, and obedience was an integral part of their DNA, as we would say today. Well, back then they didn't know that DNA existed. The officers will not have found it easy to make the decision, but in the end, their patriotism prevailed. They wanted to continue, regardless of what the Führer had ordered. They hoped they would be able to convince him in the end. A risky game, for sure. A flight under the radar, as we would say today, even though way back then the radar was just in its very early stages. So no new rifle, the Führer had said. The weapon was then renamed, and now it was officially called Maschinenpistole 43. Nice and inconspicuous. Technically, however, everything remained the same. And when Schmeisser had finished his work, several thousand weapons were manufactured and issued to the troops, still without Hitler knowing. The soldiers were thrilled. It was exactly the weapon they needed. Now all that was missing was the Führer's blessing. Would he agree? Or, in one of his dreaded fits of rage, bring the entire leadership of the weapons office before a court-martial? It was a moment of destiny. But Hitler did not rage. On the contrary, he was enthusiastic. His previous rejection was forgotten. He immediately recognized that this weapon was a force to be reckoned with. A potential game changer, as we would say today, a disruptor. And so it came to pass that Adolf Hitler, perhaps the worst war criminal and mass murderer of modern times, gave the modern infantry weapon that still dominates today its name. It shall be called a Sturmgewehr, Hitler decided. Wow. And so it came to pass that from 1944 onwards, the German Wehrmacht and the Waffen-SS possessed a superior infantry weapon. But the weapon came too late to turn the tide. The Allies' superiority was too overwhelming, the losses too high, and the supply of soldiers, weapons, and ammunition too weak. In April 1945, Hitler committed suicide. And just a few days later, unconditional surrender followed. Germany had lost the war. Before we look at how the story continued, let's take a closer look at the weapon. I don't have an original here. Fully automatic weapons are prohibited for civilians in Germany. But I do have a weapon that is as similar to the original as possible. The BD-44, manufactured by the Dittrich company in Kulmbach in Upper Franconia. Okay, so as you see, we not only have one Sturmgewehr 44, assault rifle 44 for you, but I have a total of 3 of them. None of them is an original, but one of them comes really, really close to the original, and it's actually good enough to really show you how the Sturmgewehr 44 works. But first things first, we'll start with this one here. It looks absolutely authentic, and it has the right weight and everything, and you can even like track the action, and you can even fire, quote unquote. But this is actually a Dänix demonstration object. This means this was never shooting, this will never shoot, this is simply a model gun with the original weight and size and everything. And so it's really great to just hang it on the wall, but it is not a weapon, and it won't ever be a weapon. All the functionality is limited to just tracking the action and then firing. But like even the safety switch here is all not functional, and you can also not disassemble it like the original. Still, it's a lot of fun, and I'm very grateful for Brandy from BM Waffenhandel here in Germany, who supplied this one here, and also the next one I'm going to show it to you, and as a loaner, so I can now demonstrate this to you. So this next one here, again, looks like the original, and it's actually a functional gun, but this is a 22 caliber rifle. It's made by GSG. It even carries the name Schmeisser on it. This is actually something that is still in production, I believe. It's not easy to find. It really works much like the original Sturmgewehr 44, but it is, of course, 22 LR. This means it's very inexpensive to shoot and a lot of fun to shoot. You know, the magazine, everything works just like the original, but of course, it's a 22 and it's not the original. But very nice. This one here is the undisputed star of the evening. This is actually a Dittrich BD-44. So this is a German manufacturer, and Dittrich makes this gun in the original caliber if you want, and it's really as close to the original Sturmgewehr 44 as you can possibly go. But of course, it's a civilian version. This means the select fire switch is fake, so it's a semi-auto only. Otherwise, it would be illegal for me to own it here in Germany. But the safety switch is still there, and of course, the original action is in here. So this bolt locking system is fully functional, and it works absolutely like the original. So I can show this to you. So as you can see, you have this hook here. And this hook actually is not it's not the bolt itself. The bolt is lower in here. So if the shot falls, then it's the gas operated. So this means here the gas actually is going into this tube here. So as soon as the bullet has actually passed this, then gas can flow into the tube and then push the cylinder back. And the cylinder is connected to this claw that you see here. And when you rack the action, what happens is that when you look closely, I'm going to do this like so. When you rack the action, you can see that this unlocks, just swings down the bolt. So it works much like a 1911 pistol, and actually it's been copied from Browning's original invention. This means up until here, when the bullet has passed the exit hole here, up until that point, the bolt is actually locked to the barrel, and therefore it can tolerate the high energy of the round. And only after the bullet pretty much has left the barrel, then the action will slide backwards and feeding in the new round. Now this one also has a much shorter magazine, which kind of looks awful. It will still fit the original magazine, but in Germany we now have a 10-round magazine limit for semi-auto centerfire rifles. So therefore this is a limitation. It's too sad, but anyway, it still works, and I can show you the performance of the round and the gun. I will now disassemble the gun for cleaning mode. This means we're going to field strip it. First we remove the magazine. That's easy enough. Then we have a pin that we can simply push out. So it won't stay in there. You have to remove it. And then you can remove the entire rear stock together with the bolt spring. This is very tight because I'm going to stay it, and there it is. And as you see, just like in an AR-15 platform, the spring actually runs in the rear stock. So there's no space wasted. And now you can swing down the entire fire control unit together with the pistol grip. And you can then remove the entire bolt together with the gas piston. And I can now show you how the bolt works. So this is the gas piston. This means once the bullet has traveled far enough down the barrel, then gas will actually come into here and press against this face here. And this is normally how the whole thing is. And this end here is resting against a corresponding notch right in the system block. So this means it will be locked to the barrel the whole time. But once this travels backwards, it will actually shift the bolt upwards, lifting it away from the notch. And then the whole thing can travel back and eject the old case and then feed in, push by the spring, feed in another round. So this is how the entire mechanism works. So as you can see, these are actually stamped and folded steel parts. So this is not kind of milled, but this is actually stamped out. And this makes it much, much, much cheaper to manufacture this. And later on, it was actually the same technology was used by the Kalashnikov AKM. We're going to come to that later in another video following to this one. So this is the 792 by 33 round that the Sturmgewehr 44 is actually chambered for. And in comparison, this is a 9mm Luger. And so you can clearly see this was used in machine pistols before this came along. And you can see that it's clearly a longer case holding more powder and also a far heavier and longer round in here. So you can see that this is not quite as long as like a 792 for the in 98K or like a modern type 308 or something. But this actually is in the middle between a 9mm and a full-size rifle round. That is the secret of the Sturmgewehr, an intermediate round. Okay, we will now fire a few rounds over the Chrony to find out how much energy the round actually creates. So this is, of course, not original World War II ammo, but this is actually modern-day ammo made by Privy Partisan. I love the name. And this is just exclusively made for the Sturmgewehr 44. I don't think that there's any other firearm that actually fires these rounds today. Yeah, and therefore it's a 124 grain bullet. And therefore, we should be able to figure out the energy of the gun. Okay. (709, 709. 694,2, 694.2. 691.7, 691,7 Meter pro Sekunde. So we had a peak of 2023 joule. This is more like 4 times more than the 9mm Luger. A very, very impressive performance of the ancient round. Okay, now I want to find out how the gun actually feels during shooting. Therefore, I will try to shoot from a standing position, and I will still want to do aimed shots, but as fast as I can. So therefore, I'm kind of simulating a soldier shooting semi-auto, since full auto right now here is legally not an option. Okay. I am really, really impressed. This feels like shooting a 22. There was almost no noticeable recoil, even though this is over 2000 joule. It was very, very easy to hold it steady. I had no problems just hitting my target, even though I was firing pretty quickly. And yeah, I'm actually blown away by how comfortable this is shooting. And of course, parts of the reason for this is the relatively high weight of the gun. This means that, of course, it will strictly reduce recoil very much. Yeah, I love it. what is my conclusion about the Sturmgewehr 44? Well, first of all, it looks really, really hot, don't you think? Specifically with a longer magazine. This one looks a little bit well clipped. Anyway, I think that if you keep in mind that this has been first produced 80 years ago, it's just a beautiful, beautiful gun with an excellent performance. The power is great, accuracy is amazing, the shot frequency is super high, and it's so comfortable to shoot it. I think it's absolutely clear why this has changed gun history probably for hundreds of years. All in all, an amazing invention that HUGO SCHMEISSER and his team have put together 80 years ago. Now, our imaginary camera embarks on another journey. This time to the year 1949. We are in Izhevsk in Udmurtia, between the Urals and Siberia, 1,200 kilometers east of Moscow. This is where they are made, the weapons of the Soviet Union. The factories, colloquially known as Izhmash, have been the beating, tireless heart of the Russian arms industry since the time of the Tsars. In the design rooms, we meet an old acquaintance, none other than Herr HUGO SCHMEISSER. He has grown older and does not look particularly happy. No wonder, he is now in his third year of quasi-imprisonment. In 1946, he was picked up in Zul, then part of the Soviet occupation zone. Socialism needs you, they must have told him. Then he was put on a train to the east, under guard, of course. SCHMEISSER shares this fate with other high-ranking engineers and scientists. Wernher von Braun, for example, was taken to the USA. Without him, the Americans might never have landed on the moon, or would have done so much, much later. However, SCHMEISSER fared less well in Udmurtia than von Braun did in Huntsville. He was essentially a prisoner, albeit with reasonable provisions, but always under supervision. A captive man. He was needed as a consultant in the design of new weapons. Here, another central figure enters our stage, MIKHAIL Kalashnikov. To this day, we do not know whether the paths of the two men ever crossed. There are no documents, no reports. So there's no evidence of collaboration. But what we do know is this. Both were in Izhevsk at the same time. And it was here that a new weapon was developed during those exact years. The Kalashnikov automatic rifle, later known as the AK-47. The Soviets systematically examined German weapons. They replicated several Stg-44s, they tested them, and they analyzed them through and through. They were now clearly familiar with the concept of the intermediate cartridge and the automatic infantry weapon with interchangeable high-capacity magazines. Whether HUGO SCHMEISSER was more than just a silent witness to this development, we do not know. The Soviets would never have told us. Anyway. And this is precisely where documented history ends and speculation begins. Was SCHMEISSER maybe the true inventor of the Kalashnikov? Nobody knows. Only one thing is certain. The Kalashnikov is not a German rifle, but it represents the culmination of a development that began in Germany and in which HUGO SCHMEISSER played a decisive role. HUGO SCHMEISSER was not dismissed until 1952, after 6 years, ill and probably quite embittered. He died just under a year after his return home on September 12, 1953, in Erfurt. not rich, not famous, without honors. The inventor of the submachine gun was only 68 years old. Was he also the inventor of the assault rifle? In my opinion, yes. If you have to associate a single name with the birth of the assault rifle, then for me, it is HUGO SCHMEISSER. Not because he was on his own. He wasn't. But because he was responsible for the first successful implementation of a new concept. The world's first assault rifle, the Sturmgewehr 44, is his baby. That's my opinion. MIKHAIL Kalashnikov, on the other hand, created something that would change the world. His Automat had all the advantages of the Sturmgewehr 44, but none of the disadvantages. The weapon was lighter, more robust, and much easier to manufacture. Okay, it might have been a little less accurate on longer distances, but definitely accurate enough for the job. Its robustness, on the other hand, is legendary. You can leave an AK-47 in the mud for days, and it will still shoot. You can run over it with a truck and throw it from the 3rd floor onto the street. Pull the trigger and rat-tat-tat-tat. A weapon made for war in the jungle, in the trenches, in the Arctic, and just everywhere else. For this, Kalashnikov was honored and admired. Things that Schmeisser did not receive, especially not during his lifetime. The Russians continued to develop the AK-47. In 1959, the AKM replaced the AK-47. Basically, the weapon remained the same, but it was now lighter and designed for mass production. A stamped receiver made the weapon significantly cheaper. Schmeisser had already recognized this and implemented it with the Sturmgewehr 44. But Mikhail Kalashnikov only took this step with the AKM in 1959. The result is the AK as the world knows it today, the Kalashnikov. Let's take a closer look at the weapon at this point. So this is my AKM. Of course, it's a civilian version. This means it doesn't have select fire. This means it's semi-auto only. Otherwise, it would be illegal in Germany. This actually is typically, I mean, you look at this gun and you say that's a Kalashnikov. That's an AK. And it is. But this one is made in Poland by WBP. This is the so-called midi jack. This means it's a little shorter than a full-size AKM. There is an even shorter version that's called the mini jack, but I wanted the medium version. Of course, you can see that this is stamped metal. So the entire system block, typical for the AKM, is stamped and not milled. The milled blocks was just only for the original AK-47, and they skipped this later on. Otherwise, it's really made to be robust. This is not designed to win beauty prizes. For example, take this safety switch. This is really functional. It's ugly as heck, but it's very functional, and you can easily operate it even with gloves on. Otherwise, this is also civilian because this actually has a 10-round magazine limit, but they cleverly make these magazines so you can flip them around. So this is 10 rounds and this is 10 rounds, and you can simply flip it if you want to fire more rounds. Yeah, and otherwise, the gun, of course, is a little bit different in design to the others. For example, the main spring is not running in the stock like it does in the Sturmgewehr 44 and also in the AR-15 platform. This runs entirely inside here, which actually makes the weapon typically a little longer if you want to achieve the same barrel length, just because you need the room for the spring. Let's compare it to the Sturmgewehr 44. Okay, so these are the two guns in comparison. This is the Sturmgewehr 44, or the BD-44 in my case here, and this is my midi jack AKM. And as you can easily feel, you can't see it, but if you feel, this is so much heavier. This is a lot lighter than this one. And it's clear because there's so much steel in this thing. Whereas this one here, you see this wood in the front. The magazine is all plastic here. So this means that this actually is a much lighter gun. And also you can see that the barrel length, if you compare it, is shorter than this one here. So this is because the main bolt spring is actually running in the rear stock here, like it does in the AR-15. And also this one here is different. The wooden stock is not hollow, and the magazine spring is in the housing here. Okay, let's field strip it for cleaning, so you can also see the inner workings. First of all, of course, we remove the magazine. Then we push in the main spring with this here, like so, which means that we can then simply take off the cover. And here you can see the main bolt spring. And it's very easy to remove. You just push this to the front and you can lift it out. And as you see, it's a fairly long spring, but more thin than in an AR-15 or in the original Sturmgewehr 44. You can then simply take out this assembly here. So you remove the gas piston together with the original bolt. And you can see that actually the bolt is actually turning inside here. So this is how it locks. It has these notches here that lock firmly in the system. And once the gas is pushing against the gas piston, then the thing turns and unlocks, and then the old spent case can be ejected and a new one can be fed in. Very easy to disassemble, very easy to clean, and as you see, the robustness of this becomes very obvious. This is a super easy to clean, super easy to field strip gun. So here we have the two rounds. So this is the 792 by 33, fired from the Sturmgewehr 44. And this one here is the 762 by 39, fired from the AKM/AK-47. And as you can see, this is larger, but not super large. And the bullet weight, however, is the same, 124 grain, which is about 8 grams. We will now fire a few shots over the Chrony and find out how the energy is comparing to the Sturmgewehr 44. (700,3) 593,5 704,0. So we saw that the energy level of this was very comparable to the Sturmgewehr 44. Actually around 2000 joule. But you have to keep in mind that this is a version with a shortened barrel. Therefore, a full-size AKM was probably a little faster than what we saw from the Sturmgewehr 44. But however, it's staying in the same ballpark, I would say. Very comparable guns. I will now do 5 shots in the upright standing position, fired from the shoulder, in order to compare how comfortable and fast I can shoot in an aimed fashion, but as quickly as I can. Let's find out. Alright, so this was a lot less comfortable than shooting the Sturmgewehr 44. Actually, I would have to raise my shoulder very high so I can still aim, or I just have to press just the tip of the buttstock here against my shoulder. The recoil feels a lot harder, and I think that is the case because the gun is so much lighter. So you pay a price for a lightweight gun. In any case, it was absolutely manageable, of course. Not horrible, but definitely it was much more pleasant to shoot the Sturmgewehr 44. So what's my conclusion for the AKM here in my version? Well, I have to say it's a really, really great assault rifle. It really is. It's far lighter than the original Sturmgewehr 44, but it's also not as comfortable to shoot. It shares a lot of the features. It's comparable in energy, but of course it's more compact and absolutely more robust. It is definitely an improvement against the Sturmgewehr 44. However, the concept remains the same. Therefore, these guns are clearly in the same category. A great gun for sure, and of course it breathes robustness and practicability, with every detail. So I'm actually glad that I have it in my collection. But we are now at the beginning of the Cold War, and the Americans also needed a modern infantry weapon. Of course, it had to be an assault rifle. No other concept could be seriously considered. We swing our space-time camera around once again. And this time, we're heading across the pond to 1950s America. More specifically, we are in California in 1957 in a small town called Costa Mesa on the coast, somewhere between Los Angeles and San Diego. This is where the small company Armalite, a subsidiary of aircraft manufacturer Fairchild Aircraft, is based. And here we meet our third and final protagonist, Eugene Stoner, a former Marine and a war veteran. Not an old-school gunsmith, but a man with practical experience. A man who today would be called a nerd, maybe. Look at him, a chubby-cheeked man with glasses. Not a gunsmith, and yet he was to make military history. He is considered the father of the AR-15 platform, the basis for a whole flood of military and civilian weapons in medium caliber. It all began with a spectacular failure, though, the AR-10, an automatic rifle in 7.62 by 51 NATO caliber. The weapon itself was visionary, but it had the same main problem as the German FG-42 paratrooper rifle. The very powerful cartridge, in combination with a light rifle, does not allow for accurate bursts of fire. The recoil is simply too high. Added to this were a few teething problems. The weapon did not catch on sometimes. We see Stoner in a meeting with his team. He's wearing a white short-sleeved shirt with a pen holder in the breast pocket. Typical nerd attire. It is hot in the Californian summer. The air conditioning is running at full blast. Yet his shirt has sweat stains under the armpits. Can you see it? Can you smell it? Imagine. The meeting room is half full. It's a small company after all. Apart from Stoner, there are maybe 6 men in the room. There are coffee pots and cups on the table, and a few donuts on a plate in the middle. Probably eaten on a little bit. A presentation board is attached to a tripod. It shows a sales curve with 2 curves, AR-10 sales, target and actual. The target curve points proudly upward, while the actual curve does exactly the opposite. Nobody wants our weapon. Why is that? Stoner asks the group. One of the other men answers. Well, at my last demonstration, we had 6 jams. These damn magazines just don't work. Embarrassing. Another man says, no one can hit the target with more than 3 shots in a burst. I even hired a weightlifter as a shooter, but even with him, the muzzle points skywards after the 5th shot at the latest. We should do what the Germans did back then and what the Russians are doing now. Short casing, half as much powder, problem solved. A third man interjects. 762 by 35 or something like that. Stoner thinks about it, rubbing his nose with his index finger. A new cartridge, that's a good idea. But why continue to use such thick bullets? They'll be useless with so little powder, very slow. If we go to a smaller caliber, the recoil will decrease significantly, but the bullet will be faster rather than slower. But will the stopping power still be sufficient? Interjects one of the other gentlemen, an overweight man in his 50s. Stoner? We're not talking about close combat here. No soldier with a bullet in his chest will continue to attack, regardless whether it's a 762 or just a 5mm diameter bullet lodged in his body. Maybe even better if he's injured, then 2 other soldiers will have to take care of him. Well, then let's talk to the people from the ammunition department, someone interjects. Yes, exactly. I'll go over there right away, says Stoner. The meeting is over. The gentlemen stand up, the last donuts in their hands, probably wrapped in paper tissue. We don't know if this meeting ever took place. I made it up, I admit. But it could have happened. Stoner knew from his own experience as a former Marine that firepower is not a matter of bullet mass, but of hit probability. This increases with bullet velocity and decreases with higher recoil. So Stoner's recipe was less recoil, less fatigue, greater range through higher velocity. He did not follow the path of Schmeisser and Kalashnikov to simply reduce the case length and powder charge. No. He switched to a smaller caliber, 5.56mm, and used much lighter projectiles. The 5.56 NATO cartridge was born. Civilian versions, as you all know, are called 223 Remington. The AR-10 became the AR-15, the weapon of an aircraft designer, not a gunsmith. For Stoner, everything revolves around lightweight construction. The company was called Armorlight, after all. And ergonomic perfection was equally important. Everything is modular in the AR-15, and even disassembly for cleaning has been thought through down to the last detail. The AR-15 is made mostly of aluminum and plastic instead of steel and wood. The gas pressure system does not require a piston, making it lighter yet still reliable. The barrel is longer than that of the Schmeisser and Kalashnikov, because Stoner simply moved the recoil spring to the rear stock, into the so-called buffer tube. The overall length remained compact, but the 20-inch barrel allows for excellent accuracy even at longer ranges. The AR-15 definitely was a great success, but it was not a great success for Stoner and Armorlight. We are back in California, this time 2 years later, in January 1959. The office of the CEO, the managing director, Stoner is sitting on a chair in front of the desk. Eugene, I'll be blunt. It's no use. The decision has been made. We are selling both AR weapons as soon as possible. I'm sorry. Stoner is shocked. Why? The demonstrations went fantastically. The AR-15 beat all of its competitors hands down. Compared to it, they're all huge clunkers that no one can keep on target for long. With my 15, basically, any old codger can hit a target 200 meters away with 30 shots in a few seconds. Eugene, we know that. And it's great. You've done a great job. The gun is awesome. But we're running out of money. Even if we get the Air Force contract, we'll be broke by the time it's finalized. We wouldn't even have the capacity to equip the LA or Frisco police with enough weapons, if they gave us an order, which won't happen. Smith & Wesson, Colt, Remington, they'll sweep the board in tenders like this. We don't stand a chance. That's a mistake. This rifle is unique. Stoner stands up. Count me out. The door slams shut. The glass pane vibrates, and for a moment it looks as if it's about to fall out of its wooden frame. Can you see it? Can you hear it? Of course, the scene is another invention of mine. But the fact is, the AR-10 and AR-15 were sold in 1959, and Armalite dropped out of the race for the new service weapon. The small company Armalite had nothing that could make a weapon like the AR-15 a success. No connections to the military. No manufacturing capacity. No relevant networks. And above all, no money. The weapon was sold to Colt in 1959, and Stoner left Armalite just 2 years later, undoubtedly frustrated by the loss of his baby, the AR-15. He remained loyal to the arms industry and developed some very good rifles, but he never achieved a breakthrough. When he died in 1997, I still remember it, at the age of 74, he was neither rich nor a national hero. Compared to the sad end of HUGO SCHMEISSER, Stoner certainly fared better, but the fame and recognition he received fell short of what his work deserved. Colt, on the other hand, was in a completely different position, and was able to sell the weapon, first to the Air Force in 1964. Then, in 1967, came the final breakthrough. After minor technical improvements, the Army also officially introduced the rifle as the M16A1 as a service weapon. Jackpot! Since then, the weapon has remained essentially the same. The M4A1 is closely related to the original M16A1. Almost 60 years separate the two weapons, and yet a soldier from the Vietnam War would immediately understand and be able to operate the modern version, the M4. Let's now take a look at the models in comparison. Okay, so this is my original M16A1, and it does have all the right markings. Everything that's got to be on there is on here. So, and it also has the full auto switch. However, it's a deactivated decoration-only piece. This means that it does retain some of the original functionalities, like this. But of course, the bolt has been cut off, and actually you can no longer fire the gun. So this is all deactivated. But it's largely still an original and very great for comparison. As you can see, it has the plastic rear stock where the spring is running inside of the tube in here. It does have a very lightweight plastic front handguard. Everything here has been optimized to be lightweight. You have the typical bridge for the sighting system, which also is high enough so that I can actually press it against my shoulder and fire like so. This is just a typical Vietnam era M16, and I'm actually happy that I have the original. I also have a fully functional 30-round magazine, and it's only legal for me to own it because I bought it before 2017, and I officially registered it. So this is fully functional, and I can use it in other AR-15s that I have without a problem, but I cannot buy new ones. Even this gun here in decoration is now no longer legal to own without a permit. I can only own it because I also owned it before 2017. I can only sell it to people that have a license that nobody ever gets. So it's a super rare item in Germany, even though it is decoration only and deactivated. All right, so here we have the two guns in comparison. Here the Sturmgewehr 44 and here the M16A1. And, you know, of course, both are clearly assault rifles. However, they definitely also differ a lot. First of all, this one is really feather light in comparison with this hunk of steel. You can really see and feel that this has been optimized to be lightweight. And you can definitely see that this was made by a company that typically is in the aircraft business. You try to make everything lightweight. You can also see that the M16 is longer than the Sturmgewehr 44, but that is only because the barrel is longer. You know, so this one has a really long barrel in comparison. Which is great for accuracy and so on, I believe. But however, a lot of the civil version modern AR-15s have a shorter barrel because that is a bit long. Yeah, but definitely both are assault rifles. But of course, I also have to compare the gun in a shooting version to the other two guns that we tested so far. And this means that I had to get another gun. And thanks to BM Waffenhandel, thanks Brandy for this, I got my hands on this Schmeisser. Yes, Schmeisser. It's the same company name, but a completely different story. So they have nothing to do with the original HUGO SCHMEISSER. They only bought the brand. But it's funny that this is again a Schmeisser. So this is actually a Schmeisser AR-15. This is basically a modern version of the original AR-15 as invented by Eugene Stoner. A lot of the parts are completely exchangeable with my M16. For example, the magazine, I could still use the 30-round magazine from the original M16 in this one here. This one, of course, if you buy it brand new, it's limited to a 10-shot magazine. That fits in the original M16, of course. It has a few changes. For example, now the rear stock is adjustable, which wasn't the case in the original M16. It also no longer has this triangular shaped front cover, but it now has a full rail system with a long Picatinny rail on top, so I can mount different optics. And also I can attach things like this foregrip here, this handle. I can attach this to the so-called M-lock system. Now, of course, I no longer have this bridge for the iron sights, but now I have a Picatinny rail, so I can install modern optics. This one here, for example, which is really nice. But I can also attach sideways aiming systems like this one here. These are iron sights, so therefore I could just sight in the red dot for a longer distance. And if I want to go short distance, I just flip this to the side and aim over the iron sights like so. So this is absolutely possible to do. Now this is much more modern. This also doesn't have the 20-inch barrel of the original M16. This one only has 16.75 inches. So it's a good 3¼ inches shorter than the original length, which a lot of people do. This is actually still quite a long barrel for a civilian version of an AR-15. A lot of them have shorter barrels, like 14 inches and so on. But I wanted accuracy. Yeah, and this is the one that we will shoot because it fires the same round, the 2-3 round, and therefore we will have comparable results with the other two guns. Okay, let's now field strip the AR-15 in order to clean it and also so I can show you the components. The so-called lower is connected to the so-called upper part of the rifle with just 2 pins that you can simply push out, not all the way, so that you cannot lose them. So if you push out this one, you can actually just fold it down and just keep it like this, and I could clean it like that, so I don't even have to separate both parts. But of course, it's very easy to also press out the front pin. Okay. Now you can separate the lower, and in here you can see the entire fire control unit. This means the hammer, the trigger, the sear, everything is just in here. Also, you can see that the spring for the bolt is actually in here in the so-called buffer tube. So this is not separated like in the other two guns. Now we can simply remove the entire bolt part. So just move this out here and take them out. So this is the bolt. And this, of course, is just a lever to put it back. Here you can also see how it actually locks. This is done with all these several notches. So it's also turning, of course. And what you cannot see is, like in the other two guns, we had these piston rods for the gas system that pushes back the bolt to unlock it. This is not the case here because Eugene Stoner invented the so-called direct impingement. This means that the gas is actually not pushing against the piston, but it's pushing directly against the bolt, which saves a lot of weight. You know, remember, weight loss was something that was very important for Stoner and Armalite. And therefore, this does not need a piston. It's directly activated by the gas that flows through the gas tube. Yeah, so very easy to disassemble and reassemble, very easy to clean. Of course, this makes it completely universal because I can just put this lower against any other upper. I can even change calibers that way. So I think it's a very, very, very clever design. Back. Okay, these are the 3 rounds in comparison. This is the 792 by 33 from the Sturmgewehr 44. This one is the 762 by 39 from the AKM. And this here is the 2 to 3 round fired from the AR-15 or the M16. So, and you can clearly see the difference. Now, these 2 rounds are much more comparable to each other, but this one has a much lighter and much thinner round bullet. So this gives it the speed advantage because look at the case. The case is actually longer than this one here, so there's probably more powder in here. But in combination with the light bullet, this will create a very high velocity and also a lot less recoil, which we will now test. We will now shoot a few rounds over the Chrony. Now, this is a really lightweight bullet in comparison. This is only 55 grain in comparison to 124 grain for the other 2 guns. So this is not even half of the bullet weight of the other 2 guns. And therefore, of course, it is to be expected that this will be a lot faster. (922.3, 922,3, 945.4, 944.3, 944.3 meters per second. Wow. Okay, so we are now close to 1,600 joule with the 2 to 3 round in the AR-15. This is significantly less energy than for both the Sturmgewehr 44 and the AKM. But this, of course, also comes clear that this is a lot faster. The rounds are a lot faster than the rounds of the other 2 guns. And this is basically the principle of the AR-15 in the 2 to 3 caliber. Light recoil, very high velocity, and still quite impressive energy. Again, we will do 5 aimed shots, but with a high shot frequency, as high as I can do, in an aimed fashion. And of course, we want to compare how comfortable the gun shoots in comparison to the other 2 guns. Wow. All right, so this was really impressive because this shoots like a 22 LR. No, of course has some recoil, but it's really manageable. This is much more manageable than the AKM and also more manageable than the Sturmgewehr 44. But of course, the round does have less energy. That has to be said. All in all, it's just an amazing shooter. I just love the AR-15 platform because it's just so cool. What is the conclusion about the AR-15 platform? Well, it's absolutely amazing. This is really, really so advanced. It shoots like a dream. It has all the features that you require in a modern military gun or a very cool semi-auto civilian version. So no wonder that this is one of the dominating guns in today's market, as well in the military as also in the civilian market where legal. So I'm a fan. I do not have an AK-74 here in the 5.45 caliber, which is now the most modern version of the Kalashnikov. However, I think that the performance will be very similar to the performance of the AR-15 or M16 in 223. However, I would like to also say that now the AR-15 platform is kind of inching closer again to the original concept of the Sturmgewehr 44. This is my Fight Light SCR Bandit in the 300 blackout caliber. This is actually a short gun with a fat silencer for shooting it in a silent fashion with subsonic ammo. And this is the round it fires, and it is much closer to the original Sturmgewehr 44. Okay, so these are the three rounds. This is the Sturmgewehr 44 round, and this is the 223, and this is the 300 blackout. And as you can see, this one again has a much fatter, much thicker and heavier bullet. This is actually the same bullet weight as the original Sturmgewehr 44 round, 124 grain, about 8 grams. And this one is the super light 3.6 gram, 55 grain 223 round. And people are doing this so that you can shoot it in a subsonic fashion, silenced, so that it's really silent and still have enough energy. And you can only achieve this because of the speed of sound. This is a defined barrier. You can only achieve this by going heavier in the bullet. Therefore, it's interesting to see that now the AR platform is kind of inching closer in part, not completely, to the original Sturmgewehr 44 concept. The Russians picked up on the idea of the small caliber cartridge. Kalashnikov simply adapted the AKM to a new cartridge, the 545 by 39. The new AK-74 then proved itself in the Afghanistan war. Reliable, relatively quiet, light ammunition, flat trajectory, a winning model. However, the Soviet Union did not win the war in Afghanistan. The assault rifle, a concept that has become established. Its three main characteristics: switchable firing modes, semi-full automatic, large interchangeable magazines, and a medium caliber cartridge that is easy to control, even in continuous fire. Those distinguish it from other rifle types, even though they are often not entirely dissimilar. The G3, the FAL, but also the AR-10 and yes, even the FG-42 paratrooper rifle. These are not assault rifles, but so-called battle rifles, because they fire full caliber cartridges. A civilian AR-15 is technically not an assault rifle because it does not offer a fully automatic mode. The assault rifle has largely replaced the traditional battle rifle as the standard infantry weapon on this planet. Among the world's major armed forces, only a few exceptions remained for a long time in which full power cartridges continued to play a central role. India is the most prominent example, largely due to the long engagement distances encountered in the Himalaya in high altitudes. Overall, however, the global trend is very clear. Intermediate caliber rifles have prevailed. How many of the three platforms, Sturmgewehr 44, Kalashnikov, and AR-15, have been manufactured to date? We don't know exactly, but we can make educated guesses. Around 425,000 to a maximum of 500,000 Sturmgewehr 44 assault rifles were produced, almost exclusively during the war. Not much production afterwards. The Kalashnikov platform, i.e. the AK-47, AKM, AK-74 and countless international derivatives, is estimated to have produced a whopping 70 to 100 million weapons. A truly unimaginable number. But the AR-15 platform is also a mass phenomenon. If you add up military M16 and M4 variants and civilian versions, even those are technically not assault rifles, there are probably between 40 and 60 million units worldwide today. In purely numerical terms, Mikhail Kalashnikov is not only the most famous, but also the most successful assault rifle developer in history. Well, the assault rifle is now over 60 years old, and I dare to make a prediction. Even in another 80 years, so Christmas time 2105, the world's dominant infantry weapon will still be an assault rifle. Improved, expanded, sure, but still clearly a legacy of HUGO SCHMEISSER's Sturmgewehr 44. Will I be proven right? Only time will tell, but there is much to suggest that I will. Now we have reached the end of this story. Three names remain: Schmeisser, Kalashnikov, and Stoner. Three men, three systems, and one type of weapon that continues to shape warfare to this day. The assault rifle is technically fascinating and dominating. But it also stands for violence, on a scale that cannot be ignored. For me, at least, this research was instructive and thought-provoking. I hope it was for you too. Finally, I would like to take the liberty of mentioning my own work with repeating bows and repeating crossbows, because I am trying to apply the principle of the assault rifle on a very small scale to such muscle-powered weapons. I, too, rely on lighter projectiles, smaller bolts and so on, that fly fast enough to be effective, even with less energy, in order to achieve faster firing rates. Instant Legolas bows, such as the Whipshot and Fenris, tactical repeating crossbows, such as the Adder, the Interceptor, and the Revo 7, follow in the footsteps of Schmeisser, Kalashnikov, and Stoner. I am in no way suggesting that I could ever achieve the significance of these three great weapons designers. Well, I can't even say so remotely, but I still find the idea interesting and worth mentioning. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.